to Lost in the Moss. My name is Audra, and today we are going to build a crested gecko enclosure. And this size setup is what we use here when we are growing out our crested geckos here. So when they reach about 5 months or so, we set them up in something like this, and they'll live in this for about, a year or so. And once they're older, they do want something bigger. Crested geckos will really use all the space you give them. So if you have room to give them a huge cage, do it, because they'll use every inch of it. And you might think they don't because they sleep all day, but at night they are all over the place, and they're going to use every single inch of the cage that you give them. So let's get started here. We are going to set up a terrarium with live plants, but we're not going to set up a drainage layer. We are going to make this an easy setup with live plants. When you're going live plants, you don't have to go all the way. You don't have to make it crazy. You don't have to build a background. It can be pretty basic. You can still add live plants and it will still be awesome. And that is what we are going to do today. Step 1, we're going to add substrate. And that is a mixture of a couple different things that we use here in the facility. So we make a special blend of soils and barks and sand, and we use that in all of our tropical enclosures here at Lick Your Eyeballs. So I'm gonna add in a good, easily, I probably should just dump the whole, let's just commit. So I've added in, it's like a couple inches of dirt on the bottom here. And because I'm not adding a drainage layer, I want there to be a lot of substrate. I'm probably actually gonna go get more so that I have a good solid 2 to 3 inches throughout, because we need lots of dirt for our plants to take root and grow and be happy. So I'm gonna go grab some more dirt. Be right back. All right, so more dirt. And so you can see I really filled it up there. And now I'm going to add the cage furniture, the stuff for our gecko to climb on, but the stuff that doesn't move around, right? The wood, the bark, stuff like that. And we are going to use oak wood and just adding in some pieces of oak wood here and making sure that they are firmly in place so that if our gecko jumps, it doesn't move it around, which is exactly what would happen right now. So let's see if we can adjust the way we have things. And this wood is cut to fit a tank with no dirt. So that is why I'm digging out the dirt. Terrarium Tetris, that's what this is. Terrarium Tetris. Okay, so it's getting there. I have a few more other pieces of wood, so I'm probably going to use this piece of bark to help wedge something somewhere so that they don't shift around when our geckos jump or move, or when your kid accidentally bumps the tank or whatever might happen with life. So here we are. We've got a pretty solid wood-based structure in here, and now we're going to add in some live plants. And we have lots of options for plants today. I like to do a vining plant in the background, and we're not going to build a background. I'm not going to get crazy and fancy and put foam in here. I am going to use a jungle pocket. Jungle pockets are super easy to use. We fill them with sphagnum moss and then wrap our plant with sphagnum moss and plant them inside. So let me show you some of the plants that I'm thinking about putting into this cage, and then we can figure out how to make it all work. So I am going to start with the plant pocket because that is going to really fill in a large portion of the tank, and then we'll try to fill in the rest of it with the terrestrial plants. I really like using vining plants with the plant pockets, because then they can really fall down and create a waterfall of plants in the background of your tank and really filling up the space a lot better. This is one plant that I really like using, but it's a very high humidity plant. This is a moss fern. It's a plant that you really have to mist heavily a couple times a day to keep this going. One that's a little bit easier and grows very fast It's a creeping fig, probably my favorite one for these because they grow so easily and quickly. The real trick with getting plants to do well in these is just not letting them fully dry out. Most of these plants require humidity. Today, I'm gonna use the creeping fig. It is really an easy plant to grow in terrariums as long as you don't let it dry out. It doesn't really wanna dry fully out. You can see its roots, so it's already really taken over the pot here. I mean, not completely, but the roots have made it to the bottom. So we're gonna knock off all the soil, just in case there's any fertilizers or anything in it, and we're gonna clean it all off here. Now we are going to wrap it in moss. I was very careful not to break any of the roots as I took the soil off. I put a little bit of moss underneath, and I'm gonna put a little bit on top and create a ball around the roots here. Easy peasy. And you can definitely leave the sphagnum moss hanging out so it breaks up the line a little bit better and you can camouflage it. And as soon as the plant starts to grow, you really don't even see it, which is pretty cool. And then it hangs with 2 suction cups. So let's figure out where we want to stick it. We could stick it right here, or we could stick it back here to fill in the background. We attach our plant pocket with suction cups. It helps if they are a little bit wet first. And really shove them on there. And they can actually hold adult crested geckos, adult gargoyle geckos, adult giant day geckos. And we can play with the positioning. That's the nice thing. We can move it around if we need to. Or we can leave it there and we can really bring the vine up and around. And if we want our vine to take off here, we can also just add a little bit of moss because this creeping fig really wants to stay damp. So if we give it a little bit of moss, and then when we're misting down the tank, if we spray that down, it'll start to root. And you will have this thing all over the place before you know it, which is pretty cool. I'll stick a little more at the top here to cover up the blunt end of the way the wood was cut. It'll also help the creeping fig really take off. Okay, so I've worked on our canopy layer a little bit. We'll come back to our canopy. Let's start to fill up the rest of the tank. I like to use plants that have a lot of big leaves, giving our crested gecko space to climb. Today I'm going to use a syngonium, and syngoniums come in all different colors and patterns. Here's 2 different ones so you can kind of compare and contrast the colors. I think I'm gonna go with the bigger one just because I want to provide as much leaf cover as possible for our little reptile friends. So I'm gonna go ahead and unpot this one just like I did the other one. This one, the roots have also made it to the bottom. The roots are a lot bigger. It's a bigger plant. So we're once again just cleaning the soil out, making sure that there's no fertilizers that end up in the soil. Because here we go, you can see there are fertilizers in our soil here. Now that they're going to be in the tank, they're going to have a new fertilizer, Gecko Poop. Gecko Poop will help our plants grow big and strong. And crested geckos, they don't need UV light. Someone's gonna argue with me. Is it beneficial to them? Probably, you know, like the sun's amazing, yeah. But you don't need to buy a fancy crazy UV light, and if you can't, they don't need it. I'm gonna keep filling in this tank, so I'm gonna dig a hole, pop the roots in, and I put a ton of soil in here, so it really allows me to cover the roots up. And it's going to be really important that for the first couple weeks while these plants are getting used to this tank, that their roots are kept very wet, and that way they can get established and take off. This is the crucial period for you not to let the tank dry out. Is the immediately after planting. Okay, so we've got that there, but we can probably add at least another plant in here and maybe even one more epiphyte. Let's see what we have. All right, so I feel like I have a little bit of space up in the front here for another plant, so I'm going to pop this tiny little fern in the front here. So we're gonna go ahead and just pop that little fern in here in this little front space. And its little baby that I accidentally popped off will also go in here. Oh, maybe not. Maybe that one will just live with me forever. Okay, so our base is starting to fill out pretty nicely. This is still looking a little bare to me, so I think we can add another epiphyte. I think that this Phalaenopsis orchid will actually fit very nicely in the corner of this tank. And it has grown so much in the pot that it's too tight for me to actually get it out of the pot. So I'm gonna use scissors to cut the pot off here. Let's see. You can really see the roots. This is an epiphyte, so it's a plant that lives on top of things. It's not a plant that puts its roots in the soil. That's why this wasn't planted into soil, it was planted into sphagnum moss. And at one point, was much looser than this. This must have been in the pot for a while. So I'll get it out here. So I think there is a good spot for it. When I'm putting plants in, I want to make sure that they're not going to grow into my door. They're going to grow up and away from my door, not to make my life more difficult. So it's something I'm thinking about here. Also want this plant to be secure, and I'm gonna use some moss and a little bit of twine to actually secure the plant fully here. You can see the roots here, and the roots, they use them for grabbing onto things. So eventually this orchid will use its roots and attach itself to the bark there. All right, so I'm gonna grab some moss, and I'm gonna use the moss to just wedge the orchid in to make it nice and secure so our little gecko can sleep on those leaves. I have found that a lot of different species of geckos actually really love the Phalaenopsis, big broad leaves. Gargoyle geckos will sleep in the leaves. My Spherodactylus and Nigropunctatus, my little dwarf Cuban geckos, bask on the leaves and then run when they see me. They're so cute. So it's pretty secure. I don't even think we need to add anything else there. We just had enough moss that we were able to wedge it into place. So the last thing that I'm going to think about right now is this ugly piece right here and this. And it's really actually easy to kind of cover that up. You can just use moss. You can use sphagnum moss, or you could use Spanish moss. And you can really fill in the canopy layer with different types of moss. And then we can also put moss in the dirt, right? To make the base look a little bit better. Instead of it being dirt, this is a terrestrial moss, right? This is actually an air plant. This is a Tillandsia. And then the sphagnum moss isn't alive, so it doesn't matter where that goes, but it helps, you know, add humidity to the tank, make the tank look prettier. You can just lay the moss down along the bottom. And we just recently got some of this moss in stock, so we have some of this moss available for you on our website right now. I'm really loving it. I've been putting it into all of the terrariums. And it really helps bring the terrarium together and look alive. And now all that's missing is a gecko.